All right, so today we're diving into something a little bit different. A book called Tax-Free Wealth
Oh, yeah.
by Tom Wheelwright. Now, I know what you might be thinking.
Okay.
Taxes, wealth, those two things don't usually go together in our minds, right?
Right.
But Wheelwright, who, by the way,
Yeah.
is Robert Kiyosaki's personal tax advisor,
Oh, wow.
actually makes the argument
Yeah.
that taxes can be a tool for building wealth. And it's a pretty interesting perspective. So in this deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to be going through some of the key strategies that he outlines in the book, and hopefully, shifting our perspective on taxes from like a burden to a potential opportunity.
Right.
So to start off, like, I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me when I was reading this book was how Wheelwright just completely reframes the whole idea of taxes. Like most of us, we think about taxes, we think about like forms and deadlines and, less money in our pockets, right?
Yes, definitely.
But he talks about the tax code almost like a roadmap to financial success, almost like a treasure map.
Well, that's interesting, yeah.
So I'm curious to hear from you, like, how does that idea resonate with you? Like, how can we possibly view the tax code as a roadmap rather than a roadblock?
Well, it's a good point. Like, when we think about taxes, it does just seem like you said, it's money out of our pocket. It's a burden. But the thing about this, governments use taxes to try to influence economic behavior.
Okay.
So they'll give incentives like tax breaks to encourage activities that align with their goals.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, if the government wanted to encourage more oil production, they might give tax breaks to oil companies.
Okay, so they're kind of steering people in certain directions.
Yeah, that's right. They're using taxes to try to, benefit the economy in specific ways.
Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, I guess it is a form of policy. They can use that to encourage or discourage certain things.
Yeah.
But how does that translate to us as individuals? Like, how do we build tax-free wealth if we still have to pay taxes?
Well, so you're not going to be able to completely avoid taxes. Nobody can really do that.
Right.
But it's about understanding those incentives that the government puts in place, and then aligning your financial decisions with them. So you're not trying to cheat the system. You're not trying to evade taxes.
Yeah.
You're working within the framework of the system, but in a way that minimizes your tax burden.
Okay, so it's more about minimizing rather than eliminating.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
This really ties into Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, which is, he mentions in the foreword to the book.
Right.
He divides people into those four categories.
Right.
Employees, self-employed, big business owners, and investors. And, really, the idea is where you are in that quadrant can really impact how much you pay in taxes.
Interesting.
Like, two people could be making the same amount of money, but if one's an employee and one's, say, a business owner, the business owner might be able to write off a lot of expenses that the employee can't.
Right.
So it's not just about how much money you make. It's about how you structure your income and your expenses to minimize your tax burden.
Gotcha. So it's about understanding like the rules of the game and playing the game strategically.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
And Wheelwright really emphasizes this, the tax code, it's not meant to be this impossible to understand thing.
Right.
He says that it's a system with built-in benefits, like deductions and credits that are actually there to help us.
Yeah.
He actually talks about depreciation being one of them.
Okay, yeah, he mentioned depreciation, and that's something I've always heard the term, but I never really understood. Like, what is depreciation?
Yeah.
And how can that actually be used as a tax advantage?
So basically, depreciation is let's say you buy a piece of equipment for your business. You don't have to deduct the entire cost of the equipment in the year that you buy it.
Oh, okay.
You can spread it out over the useful life of the equipment.
Right.
So it reduces your tax burden over time.
Wow. Okay. So it's like spreading out the expense over the life of the asset.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's just one example. There's many more strategies and deductions that are available.
Okay. So it sounds like instead of seeing the tax code as like this monster in the closet,
right,
it's more like a treasure map.
Exactly.
that we can use to our advantage. So if that's the case, like what are some of the key strategies that Wheelwright outlines for building tax-free wealth? Like, how do we actually?
Well, he goes into detail about a lot of different strategies, like utilizing the different tax brackets, taking advantage of tax credits, lowering property taxes, sales taxes, those kinds of things.
All right. I think we definitely need to dive into those in a little bit more detail.
Definitely.
So, first of all, we're talking about tax brackets. Yeah. I think a lot of people have heard that term, but they don't really understand how they work. So can you explain, like, what are tax brackets?
So basically, tax brackets determine the rate at which your income gets taxed.
Yeah.
But the thing is, our tax system in the U.S., it uses marginal tax rates. So that means you're not just taxed at, one rate for your entire income.
Right.
Different portions of your income are going to be taxed at different rates depending on which bracket they fall into.
So it's not like if you make, $100,000, you're going to be taxed at, say, 30%.
Exactly. No.
Of your entire income.
Right.
It's like chunks of your income are taxed at different rates.
Yeah. So the first portion of your income might be taxed at, say, 10%.
Okay.
And then as you make more money, the next portion will be taxed at 15%, and so on.
So how does that work to our advantage then? Like, how do we actually?
So the key is to kind of plan your income and your deductions strategically.
Okay.
So that you can minimize how much of your income falls into those higher brackets.
So like, for example, if you're right on the cusp of going into a higher tax bracket, it might make sense to defer some income to the next year.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. So
or to put more money into, like, tax advantage retirement account.
Okay, so there are things we can do to kind of strategically manage those brackets.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about those tax credits you were talking about?
So tax credits, they're even better than deductions.
Okay.
Because they actually reduce your tax liability dollar for dollar.
Oh, wow.
So a deduction, it reduces your taxable income.
Okay.
But a credit, it actually reduces the amount of tax that you owe.
Wow, that's
directly better. Yeah.
So it's like a direct discount.
It's like a discount.
Yeah, on your taxes.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some examples of tax credits?
There are a lot of tax credits.
Okay.
There's credits for, like, childcare expenses. There's credits for, like, energy efficient home improvements. Even for, like, educational expenses in some cases.
Okay, so it's definitely worth exploring what tax credits might be available to us.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got tax brackets, we've got credits. Yeah. What are the things?
He also talks about minimizing property sales and value-added taxes.
Okay. Now, those sound a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, those can be a bit more involved. But, the basic principle is still the same.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the rules surrounding those taxes and finding ways to minimize your liability within the law.
So like, for example, with property taxes, I know there are, like...
Right. There's exemptions in a lot of states for, like, seniors or veterans.
Yeah.
Businesses can sometimes structure their operations in ways that minimize, like, sales tax.
Okay.
So there are things you can do.
So it's all about understanding those specific rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Okay. So it really seems like the main message here is that it's not about trying to cheat the system. Right. It's not about trying to, find loopholes.
Yeah.
It's about working within the system.
Right.
But being smart about it.
Yeah.
And understanding how to legally and ethically minimize your tax burden.
Exactly. And that's something that Wheelwright emphasizes, over and over in the book is that, these strategies are all above board. It's it's not about trying to pull a fast one on the IRS. It's about being a knowledgeable taxpayer.
An empowered taxpayer.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So, that all makes sense in theory.
Right.
But I think for a lot of people, they're probably thinking, okay, like, this is getting a little bit too complicated for me. Like, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
So how do we know if these strategies are right for us?
Yeah.
And how do we even find a tax advisor
who
can actually help us implement these things?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something we're going to dive into. But first, I think it's important to kind of go over some of the more advanced strategies that Wheelwright talks about.
Yeah.
He mentions things like,
entity planning to protect your assets. And then he also talks about retirement planning strategies that are really focused on long-term wealth preservation.
Okay, I'm ready to dive deeper into those.
All right, let's do it.
Let's unpack these advanced strategies and see how they can help us build a more secure financial future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about some of those more advanced strategies from the book.
Yeah.
And one that really caught my attention was entity planning.
Okay. Yeah. Entity planning. Yeah. I've heard that term thrown around, but I don't really understand what it actually entails.
So basically, entity planning is about choosing the right legal structure for your business or your investments.
Okay.
So instead of holding those assets directly in your own name, you set up a separate legal entity to own them.
Okay.
And that can really help protect your personal assets.
Okay, so it's like a legal shield. Yeah, like a fortress around your wealth.
Okay, so instead of me owning my business or say like rental property, I create a separate entity that owns it.
Exactly.
Okay, so what kind of entities are we talking about here?
So some common structures are like LLCs, S Corp, and trusts.
Okay.
And each one has its own pros and cons in terms of, like liability protection, taxation, administrative requirements.
Okay, so it sounds like choosing the right entity
it's a big decision.
A pretty important decision.
And you definitely want to talk to a qualified attorney and tax advisor to figure out what's best for you.
Don't try this at home, folks.
Let's say not.
Okay. All right. So entity planning helps us protect our assets.
Yeah.
But what about, making sure that those assets last through retirement? Because Wheelwright talks a lot about retirement planning in this book.
It's not just about, saving money. Yeah. It's about making sure that your savings are protected from taxes and that they're actually generating income that you can live on during retirement.
Okay, so we hear a lot about like 401ks and IRAs.
Well, those are the main things to consider, or are there other options? So those are definitely popular choices.
Right.
But Wheelwright, he talks about a whole range of possibilities.
Okay.
He looks at things like Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, even self-directed IRAs, which give you a lot more control over your investments.
Yeah.
And then for entrepreneurs, there's something called a solo 401k, which has its own set of advantages.
So it sounds like there's this whole world of retirement planning strategies that I think most people just aren't even aware of.
Yeah, it's really amazing how many options there are out there.
Yeah, and I guess, the more options we have, the better the chances of us finding something that actually aligns with our goals in the situation.
And the earlier you start, the better.
Right. Yeah, time is definitely on our side.
Absolutely.
When it comes to retirement planning.
Compound interest, it's a beautiful thing.
So it sounds like this book isn't just for, people who are already wealthy or already have, like, a complex financial situation. It's really for anyone who's just looking to take control of their finances.
Exactly. It's about empowerment.
Okay. Yeah.
It's about, understanding that the tax code, it can be this powerful tool for building wealth, for protecting your assets, and for achieving your goals.
So, it's great to have all this knowledge, all this information.
Right.
But I think for a lot of people, they're probably wondering, okay, like, what are the first steps? What do I do with all of this?
That's a great question. So even if you're just starting out, there are some simple but really effective things you can do.
Okay.
First and foremost, educate yourself.
Okay.
So books like this, they're a great resource.
Right.
Attend financial literacy workshops, explore online resources.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay. So it's really about taking that first step to learn.
Yeah.
Okay. And what comes after?
And then once you have that basic understanding, take a look at your own financial situation.
Okay.
So review your last tax return. See if there are any areas where maybe you're overpaying.
Okay. Or